Nelson Mandela was the first democratically elected president in South Africa. He is known as the father of the nation, and he spent his life as a political activist and an anti-apartheid. This means that he was against institutionalized racial segregation and discrimination. He was born Rolihlahla Mandela on July 18, 1918 in Transkei. His father was a polygamist who had 4 wives and 9 children. They all played and fought together during the day, but Nelson says that at the end of the day they ate from one dish. He said that this taught him about equality and working together from a young age. His siblings noticed his leadership qualities even when he was a boy and comment on them on one of the documentaries I watched, which was really interesting to hear from their perspective. His father became ill when he was around age 12 and entrusted Mandela to Chief Ntaba as a servant. He told the chief that if he educated Mandela, he would always be loyal to him because he saw a lot of potential in his son. He was groomed to be chief counselor to the king and was sent to the best schools. I found it interesting in 1939 he went to University College of Fort Hare, which is actually a Wesleyan Methodist school, and I work at a Wesleyan college, so I thought that was really cool. Him and his cousin were expelled in 1940 for political activism, and the king was extremely upset about this, so he brought him home and said that if he doesn't go back to Fort Hare, then he's going to arrange a marriage for him. And so Mandela and his cousin Justice fled to Johannesburg against the king's orders. Once they were there, Mandela met Sassoon, which is a black real estate businessman. He had never seen a black man with an office, so he was intrigued. He went up to him, and as they got to know each other, Nelson Mandela decided that he wanted to study law. He also began going to the ANC meetings, which is the African National Congress. It's the largest and oldest political party opposing white rule. As he got more involved in 1944, he co-founded the Youth League of the ANC. Later he becomes the national secretary, and even later he becomes the president. He also, in 1944, married Evelyn Massey, and they had 4 kids. He had 2 sons and 2 daughters, but one daughter died when she was 9 months old. As he became more politically active in the ANC, they passed these laws, these pass laws, and a pass was a black man's proof of existence, really. If they didn't have it, then he was considered illegal and they would be thrown into jail. So he helped with political movements that encouraging people to defy the unjust laws, the pass laws. Mandela always volunteered for positions with the ANC even when people didn't want them, which they thought was a good leadership quality. In 1952, Mandela and Tambo became partners in the first black attorney office. He was sentenced to 9 months hard labor for violating the Suppression of Communism Act. I think this is his first time in prison. And that was around 1952. In 1953, the ANC goes underground with Mandela and Tambo's M plan, which M stood for Mandela, and that was just to break the ANC up so that they could continue acting and doing things even though they were not supposed to be. Mandela was banned from being at any public political events, so when they passed the Freedom Charter, which calls on everyone in the country to work for a democratic nation, Mandela had to watch in secret. In 1956, he's arrested and joins 155 others on trial for treason. They're all acquitted by March 29th, 1961, which basically this was the government taking these men who were political leaders working against the government, and they held them up for 4.5 years successfully. And so it was just another tactic by the government, and it really didn't mean anything. They were acquitted. So in 1958, he divorces his wife Evelyn, and soon after marries Winnie, who's much younger than him. Her parents were against this because they thought he just was looking for a wife to watch his kids while he was in jail because of his activism, but they claimed that they were madly in love. In 1960, the Sharpeville Massacre occurred on March 21st. 69 were killed and 180 were wounded. Shortly after this, they call a state of emergency, and the ANC's banned on April 8th, 1960, in which time the ANC decides to go completely underground, and Mandela offers to lead that. In 1962, Mandela secretly leaves the country to raise funds for the ANC's work and to learn to fight with martial arts so that he could teach it to other members of the ANC and his followers. Upon return, he's arrested, which is August 5th, 1962. He's sentenced to 5 years in prison for planning strikes and leaving the country. And they say that Mandela was in prison for 27 years. This is August 5th, 1962 was that first day that's considered his prison sentence. In 1963, the Rivonia trials began, and it was charging him and his comrades for high treason for sabotage. While he's in prison, his comrades are caught red-handed, basically, so the lawyers were not very confident. They sentenced him to life in prison in Robben Island in 1964. And he also delivers his very famous speech, which he says, "During my lifetime, I have dedicated myself to this struggle of the African people. I have fought against white domination, and I have fought against black domination. I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society in which all persons live together in harmony and with equal opportunities. It is an ideal which I hope to live for and to achieve, but if needs be, it is an ideal for which I am prepared to die." This is my brother-in-law Jordan went to South Africa for a summer to work, and he actually worked in their political party, today's ANC political party. So I thought that was interesting. He got to take pictures of the sign when you go into Robben Island, and he saw Mandela's cell. His first day in prison, a guard touched him, and he believed that your first day you have to act in a way that will set the tone for the rest of your time in prison. So he told that guard, "If you touch me, I will take you to the highest court in the land, and by the time it's over, you will be as poor as a church mouse." Kind of set the tone for how they were going to treat him. And he also, in a documentary, touched on some of the guards talking about how to treat him and the other members of the ANC who were in prison with him. Some guards said, "Why should we treat them so cruel when all they wanted was justice?" Others said, "No, we should treat them cruel so when they get out, they know the white man is in power." And then those others came back and said, "No, history has taught that when they will be released, and when they come to power, they will treat us the same way." And Mandela said that one of his goals was to expose the unjust conditions in the prison, because some of the guards one day would wake up and say, today this person and this person are going to be punished, and it didn't matter how hard those people worked. At the end of the day, they would say, so-and-so refused to work, and they would be punished and put in a, confinement cell or other punishments, even though those people worked really hard that day. Some of his fellow prisoners from the ANC said that while they were there, they taught each other and they argued and they planned, so they never stopped even though they were in prison. And they said that Mandela would take 3 to 4 days to even play a game of chess, because that's just the kind of character he was. He liked to think things through and contemplate on it, and he was adept and slow, but makes strong decisions. And so he really thought out even something simple like a game of chess while he's in prison. While he's in prison, his oldest son, Thembekele, is killed in a car accident in 1969. Later, his mother passes, which was really hard on him because he respected his mother a lot. He says in the documentary that she was always content with herself and with the world, and she was not emotional, but she was stable and supportive of him. He also finds out that his wife, Winnie, is arrested and banished from their hometown and to a place where she can't speak the same language, and she decides that she's gonna learn the language and work with the people, and she becomes quite a political activist herself and achieves a lot while he's in prison, and helps continue his work through letters that he writes while he's in prison and her own work. In 1985, P.W. Botha, the president, offers conditional release. He says that Mandela can be released if he agrees to give up the ANC and all of his political activism. And Mandela returns and says, "No, because my freedom and the freedom of the people are not separate, and I won't be freed if what I've worked my whole life for is just put aside. I can't do that." So he gives up his freedom for the freedom of the people of South Africa. In 1986, Mandela was sentenced to 5 years in prison. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison for 27 years. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison for 27 years. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison for 27 years. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison for 27 years. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison for 27 years. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison for 27 years. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison for 27 years. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison for 27 years. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison for 27 years. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison for 27 years. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison for 27 years. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison for 27 years. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison for 27 years. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison for 27 years. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison for 27 years. He In 1988, he gets tuberculosis, and I'll just throw it in later. In 2001, later on, he also has prostate cancer. So then F.W. de Klerk becomes the new president, and he decides to free Mandela unconditionally. And so this is a huge news. People are so happy, and this is him and his wife Winnie when they're walking through after his release, when they're back in their hometown. Shortly after, in 1990, the ANC is unbanned on February 2nd, 1990, and then he's released on February 11th, 1990. Shortly after, in 1991, he's elected president of the ANC. In 1993, he's awarded the Nobel Peace Prize along with F.W. de Klerk. And later, in 1994, he votes for the first time in his entire life on April 27th. Then on May 9th, 1994, he's elected president of a democratic South Africa. He serves one term until 1999. In 1996, he divorces Winnie, and then in 1998, he marries Gracia Machel on his 80th birthday. After his presidency term, he goes on to create the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund and Nelson Mandela Foundation, and he does other work. He continues his political activism and work for the social good until he dies on December 5th, 2013 at age 95. And now I'll go into an assessment of his leadership. As far as power, he's definitely referent and expert. When he's first tried, upon his return from leaving the country and is sentenced to 5 years from that, Winnie brings him a change of clothes, and he comes into the courthouse in this traditional dress he's wearing in this picture, and they're just shocked and astonished, but he wanted to show the people that he was keeping his tradition and their traditions, and that's referent power, showing that he's alike to them and to all the people in South Africa and how he was raised. And then in his inauguration, they kind of suggest that he wear the expected dress of a bow tie, and they say it's whimsical, and he says that he will not wear a bow tie, he hates them, and that it's reaching too far away from traditions of his people, and that he wants to look more like them. And then his expert power was he was well educated, and he was an attorney. He was the first with Tambo to open a law firm in South Africa with 2 black partners, and so his skills as an attorney helped him in a lot of ways, whether it was from that guard, the story I told you about the guard, where he knew his rights as a prisoner and was willing to take someone to court, whether it was that or whether it was helping people in different political cases and trials and understanding the law system during his political activism. And so I think all of those made him an expert to people because he was educated and he knew, and he was an attorney. So people respected him greatly. As far as his traits, like I said, his siblings marked that even from a young age he had traits of a leader. And a lot of people said even when he was a young man, he just had this, I think the quote they used in the documentary was kingliness, that you just were careful about your words when you spoke to him out of respect, because he was just, this great man, even when he was young and hadn't really proven that yet. So openness, he's always planning new movements and strikes. He's always open to new tactics to reach what he wanted. He was very low in neuroticism. He actually had a lot of difficulty sharing his emotions, like when his son died and when his mother died. When he was in prison, that really meant a great deal to him, but he wouldn't share that with his fellow prisoners and some of his best friends. He just hid it. So he was very low in that. He was always calm and focused. He had a great sense of humor. People just loved being around him. Winnie said that one of the things that really attracted her to him when they were first dating was she didn't want to go out with him. And he kind of said it in a tone that is like a command more than a asking question. But he did it with such sense of humor and persuasiveness and charm that she just couldn't say no to going on a date with him. Agreeableness, like I said, people just loved him and still do. I mean, he is probably one of the best liked leaders that I can think of. People just adored him. conscientiousness. He was responsible and dependable. He was always the first to volunteer for positions. He spent his life dedicated to the political side, and it actually made his family life suffer, which is shown through quite a few divorces, and he was just never home. But as far as politics and his main purpose in life, he was very responsible and dependable. As far as the skill approach goes, he started his technical skills with all the odd jobs that he worked, but also all of the studying he did in law school and becoming an attorney. And like I said, that helped him a lot in his political career. And so then human skills, he was great with people. I just said he was well respected. People said he was the type of personality that you want to impress even when he was a young man. You chose your words carefully, like I said. And then conceptual, he was one of the leaders of the ANC, and he planned so many things and did negotiations. He went underground when the ANC had to and planned these very intricate, elaborate operations to keep the ANC hidden from the government. As he became more prominent in the ANC, not only did his family life suffer, but his attorney life and his firm suffered because he wasn't there, he wasn't present for it. And so he moved away from technical skills and more to conceptual skills while he was in prison for so long. He was definitely a team leader. He was equally focused on the task and relationship. His theory why he believed people were capable of self-control and actually required that anyone who was going to be involved in his different events, whether it was a rally or whatever, they had to be self-disciplined and non-violent to participate. So he believed that people could do that, and obviously believed that everyone should share in the wealth of the country that they're working for. So he believes that people don't need to be forced to do it, that they want to do it. In the situational approach, he had a tendency to S2 coaching and S3 supporting. He always was right there and involved, but he really supported people at the same time. So even when he had a vision, he may have made the final decisions, but he took people's advice too and helped people at the same time by offering praise and support. And then as far as supporting goes, while he was in jail, his followers continued, and he couldn't directly do anything, but he supported them by building their confidence and motivating them, writing letters that his daughters read that gave them that motivation and hope. And then also, when he becomes president, and even a little bit before that, when he's out of jail, though, he chooses members for his political party. And this one woman who was like a right-hand woman for him in his party, she says, I couldn't believe that my hero was telling me to come work for him, and I didn't think I could. And he instilled confidence in her, and she became one of the main people advising him and working with him. So definitely supportive. He knew that she was capable to do it and supported her to where she was confident to do it. In his family life, he may have been more delegating because he trusted his wives to take care of the kids and do things while he was off doing all this political work. So she managed their family affairs. So I guess it just depended on the situation, and he adjusted to the different situations throughout his life and for what his followers needed during their political journey. I also threw in team leadership because I came across a few quotes that he was definitely a team leader. When he was offered the second quote, when he was offered freedom, the conditional terms to be let out of prison, he said, I cannot and will not give any undertaking at a time when I and you the people are not free. Your freedom and mine cannot be separated. And his daughter read this to the people because they knew he had been offered this conditional freedom, and they wanted him to be free, but he said, I won't take that freedom when you're not free. How could I do that? And so that's really a team. He stood by them even when he could have been let out of prison. He said no. And so thus in turn, they stood by him. And then another famous quote by him is just, it is better to lead from behind and to put others in front, especially when you celebrate victory when nice things occur. You take the front line when there is danger, then people will appreciate your leadership.